Welcome, welcome. This is such a fun project. So many things to learn. Even if you don't make blouses, you gotta just watch it just to learn. There's just so many different things that I'm pulling together here. And I chose this blouse, number one, because it was beautiful. And number two, simply because it had a lot of different things that we haven't discussed before or seen before. So this is a blouse from Hugo Boss. Its retail price is $278. It's currently in Nordstrom's right now. So you can, if you're close to a Nordstrom, you can go look at it. If you're online, you can pull it up as like Hugo Boss Slit blouse. You can find it. So the goal is to really take one of your patterns and make a high-end blouse and take some fabric and just make it easy and fun. So I'm going to give you a couple options here, but let's cover the areas, and I always break it down into three areas. First, the fabric, second, the pattern work, and then the sewing. So let's first off talk about the fabric that's used. In the original blouse, and again, you're going to see it here, the fabric was a silk, and you can see it's light, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. But I'm going to introduce to you a triacetate polyester, and this is what I've got on. And triacetate is a man-made cellulose fiber. So cellulose being your cottons, your rayons, and the beauty of rayon particularly is that it drapes wonderfully. So triacetate is triacetate polyester. You're going to throw it in the washer, you're going to throw it in the dryer. It is so, you'll have the blouse for a long time, but it has a tendency to breathe because it's been made to duplicate the cellulose, which is breathable. So I love them. And we've got this fabric that I'm dealing with is fabric number 2749, but you really ought to look at many of them. They actually are, they're like a crepe. They can, both sides can be used. I used the shiny side on my particular blouse, but I'm going to turn around and make a pair of pants out of the dull side and make them go together. I just think it's a win-win combination. They are really, really beautiful. I can't say anything more except that when I saw them and the price they're at, I just grabbed them because they're stunning. So again, look at this one, the 2749, but look at the other colors that we've got, because 2748, 2755, there's some beautiful fall tones that are really, really stunning. And they can be tops, pants, jackets. They just have a wide range of what they can do, and many of us are just not familiar with them. The beauty of these particular fabrics is their stretch. So they're not just a woven, they're a stretch woven, and so again, they've just got a beautiful drape to them and a beautiful hand. So when I first saw this blouse, I immediately thought of this fabric and thought, wow, that's just such a win-win. It's got a little bit of stretch to it, it's light, it drapes beautiful, and it's got some great colors to it. The blouse at the store I tried on, the $278, and if you can see, if you pull it up online, or you can see by the pictures we're showing, actually, I pulled those pictures in. There's no bust dart, it's just a straight fit. And so for me, it gapped and it didn't fit the way I wanted to, whereas when I make it, I can put in those darts and I can get the fit that I want. All right, so that's the fabric. Obviously, it would be beautiful in many different fabrics out there, so certainly, you know, don't limit yourself, and you could make it several times. What I liked is the simplicity of that slit just being so pretty and just right there. So I'm using my base classic blouse, and I always use a base that I think is the closest to what we want it to be, and classic blouse is that. But I only need three pieces. I only need the front, the back, and the sleeve. The sleeve, I used the short sleeve cut line, and I just made mine solid. The actual sleeve, as you saw in that photo, had a little bit of a slit in it to duplicate it. I just didn't care for that. I didn't think it duplicated it. If I was going to do a slit, I'd probably put a seam and literally put a slit in the seam just like it was here. To me, that's duplicated. I've got this on with my new pants that have the slit up the front, ALC's pant, and I just love it. I just love the look. Okay, so there's the sleeve, and we're not going to worry anything more about that. The front and the back, we're going to look at the properties of what the front and the back are, and we're going to draw facings. I'm going to go back to the original picture just for a minute here, and I want you to look closely at the back. So what tipped me off on this as to how the neckline was finished was two things. Number one, the back, it had a back facing, and you can see a slight little line there, so I was trying to see details. I saw that back facing. The other thing that tipped me off is in the front neckline, it has no stitching. There's no top stitching. There's no stitching, but you can see it firmly holds it in place. And so I thought, okay, the whole front's been faced. So that sparked me to go to the store and do my homework. And so I started snapping pictures of this thing inside out. And you can see the next picture is the front facing inside out. The next picture is the side facing, again, inside out. Not a side facing, but a picture of the front facing, how deep it was, how it connected to the side. I wanted to know all those answers. The back facing, then I snapped a picture of that. You can see it's much shallower. The front facing goes below the bust so that it doesn't form a line across the top, obviously. And then the back facing is much shorter, and you can see it goes right into the armhole. It doesn't go below the armhole like the front facing does. Okay, so then all I did was I took my front and I duplicated it. So I'm gonna make a couple of exceptions. I cut center front off at center front and just added a seam allowance because you don't need the buttonhole extension, which is on pattern number 600. All of this is duplicated, my cup sizing, and so the facing has a dart in it. It goes down about 5 inches. And if you just use your pattern as a guide, go to the bottom of the pocket. If you have the 600, just use the bottom of the pocket, that line, and just come straight across, and that will put you below the bust. And then what I did is I lowered this neckline 3/8 of an inch out and 3/8 of an inch down. I just wanted it to have a little larger neckline, and I measured the one in the store. Okay? All right, so that's my front facing, just literally a copy. I did the same thing to the back. Now the back is on a fold, so I had to add a seam allowance to that, and I took it down right about to the notch and then straight over, because that's again what it does in the photo. But also it has a back slit, and that back slit is 5.5 inches in length, and I wanted to make sure I cut the facing below the back slit. And then again, I lowered the neckline 3/8 of an inch in both places. Okay, so now the front slit starts 1 inch below the opening. That means I'm going to take a 3/8 inch seam allowance. It's actually only 5/8. But again, that's what it measured, 1 inch. And then that opening there is 5 inches. So you just start stitching, stop, leave it open, start stitching, and continue down. All right, but that's the pattern work. That's all it is. You're gonna cut off the short sleeve, you're gonna make a front facing, you're gonna make a back facing, taking away that buttonhole closure, adding a seam allowance to center front, and of course, because the back is cut on fold, you're gonna add a seam allowance to the back. So it's really simple. You've got 3 pieces you're starting with, and you're just making 2 additional pieces. That's it. Cut it all out. I cut it all out to where the stretch went around my body. Obviously, when you have one-way stretch, you want to make sure it goes around your body. And here we start stitching. I'm just going to give you a stitching order, and this is really fun and simple. This, it took me about 20 minutes to make these 2 pieces. It took me about 10 minutes to cut it out. I used 2 yards of fabric. It took me about an hour and a half to sew. Just sheer fun sewing. The blouse was going together, and the whole reason I want to show you this is it's something that we haven't done before in silhouette patterns, and it's just beautiful. It's just, I love the way the blouse lies. I love the double layers. I just think it's so pretty. Okay, so let's go sew. I made my pieces, I cut them out, I headed to my sewing room, and the first thing we're going to do obviously is the bust darts. And remember that your front and your front facing both have bust darts, so I just sewed all 4 darts. I did not sew the vertical darts because for me, I was going to wear it tucked in with a slacks, and I knew that that was my plan to wear it. And so I wanted it to have a little bit of a blouson. I didn't want the darts. I didn't want it that fitted. So that's why I did not stitch the vertical darts in the front or in the back. On my front facing, I stitched this center front because it's not going to be sewn on a serger. You're going to stop, and so the edges have to be finished. And if you go back and look at the inside of the blouse that I took a picture of, the facing, you can see what's serged. So again, I was duplicating what Hugo Boss did. So I serged here, and I serged the bottom edge. And again, on the back, I serged the center back seam and the finish seam. The rest of it will be incorporated. It doesn't need to be finished with a serger. Okay, darts. The next thing I did the darts, I serged the edges. I did the front slit. And so in separate sewings, I put the center fronts together, stitched down 1 inch, backstitched, skipped 5 inches, backstitched, and stitched the 2 fronts together. So now I had the slit down the front of the facing. I did the exact same thing to the front of the blouse. Stitched down 1 inch, backstitched, skipped 5 inches, stitched down, backstitched, and stitched all the way to the front. Those 2 were done. The back, I stitched together from below the slit, which the slit is about 5.5 inches down, 6 inches. It doesn't make that much difference. And stitched the rest of the back together. And then I did the same thing with the back facing, stitch those 2 together. Then you're going to stitch the back facing to the front facing at the shoulder seam. You're going to stitch the blouse front to the blouse back at the shoulder seams. So now you've basically got this blouse. It's got the front slit together, and you're going to put the neck edges together and sew all the way around the neck edges. Just literally put the front facing and the back facing unit on top of the blouse front and blouse back unit and stitch a 3/8 inch all the way around. So here comes in this next picture that I want to show to you, and this is what's called a stay stitch, and it's on the inside. That stay stitch, that little seam there, is actually only going to show on the inside of the blouse, and there's a close-up in that photo. So what you're going to do with that seam allowance is you're going to lay it flat, and you're going to stitch the seam allowance to the facing, not to the blouse. It's not going to show. You can see there's a nice, clean, pretty finish here, but what it does is it holds it in place. So it's an understitch. You're going to sew the back facing and the front facing to that seam allowance. That's all. The blouse has enough body. It will lay beautifully. And then you're going to put the slits together, and you're going to kind of go inside and stitch those lines together. It doesn't have to be all the way. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just stitch them together so that they somewhat stay in place and don't move around on the front. Now that's a little tricky, and you might say, I don't understand. Just do it. And once you do it and you get to that point, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Where you have stitched the front and the front facing and you've stopped, you're going to pick up and stitch the blouse to the facing between the slits on both sides, just so that it stabilizes, it doesn't move around. And then you're going to finish up the back. All right, so there's a little, I'm going to show you this next picture. You can see the back closure, how this closed, this back slit back here. There's a little hoop and a little button. And I love these closures. I think anytime you put a slit in and you have that, but I'll show you where I did the little elastic. I took black because black was the closest color, but this is a piece of fold over elastic. It's stretchy, it's soft, and just like with your elastic, fold over elastic can be cut to different widths. So I'm just going to cut a thin little piece. You are then going to stretch it, and when you stretch it, see all those little extras come out of there. And that is going to be your hoop. And it's nice and stretchy. It forms a great little hoop, and you can just stick it right into the seam. That's why I showed you that close-up. Stick it right into the seam and sew it in place when you're doing right sides together. Once you're doing the back slit, it's coming out of that seam, and just make sure it's big enough to cover your button. On that photo again of that button, if you notice that button was on the inside of the blouse, it doesn't make a difference if it's on the inside or the outside. I actually put mine on the outside because I don't want it against my neck. But it doesn't make any difference. The loop is still in the same place, it closes over the button, and it's good to go. The rest of the blouse I just finish. I make sure that my facings are even along the armhole areas. And same with this, I want to make sure that this front facing is pinned once it's turned to the inside. So your cutting and sewing needs to be accurate. It's sewn, and then I set my sleeve in. I do my side seams, I hem, and I'm finished. The whole blouse front is finished even before I get to the sleeve. So it's really fun. Now, I thought about this, and I want to give you like option B. Let's just say you don't want to do the dual, you just want to do the single layer, because it does simplify it. I don't need these pieces. I just need the 3. Because what I could do is simply take a seam allowance, serge it, tuck it to the inside, and top stitch it all the way around the neck edge. I could do the same thing to the slit. Just as long as you put a seam in the back, all I have to do is turn the slit under and top stitch down to the bottom of the slit and back up. So the whole front, the whole back, all of that can be done by just turning a seam under and top stitching it. The only reason I wanted you to go through this was you can see how better blouses are actually done. They're actually done with that front facing turned inside. It takes more fabric, it takes more sewing time, it takes all of those things. But if you don't want to and your skill set is not there and you're just worried that they won't line up, just finish the whole thing with just serging the edge, turning it in, and top stitching it. And it's just so simple and just still will yield you such a beautiful blouse. Your top stitching, just match your thread or contrast your thread. You could go either direction. Either way, the goal is to really save you a lot of money, improve your fit by far. I should have taken a picture of myself with that blouse on. At $278, I just was sad that the majority of the world just is subject to that. So power to the sewers. But anyway, have a wonderful time sewing. Happy sewing from Silhouette Patterns.